was providing the information about the fact that he had a motive and said he was going to kill one of the victims in this case, they never turned over to the defense the fact that she had asked about this money and would end up being paid $12,000 for providing that information. I mean, Jamie, can you put some of this in perspective for our viewers?
It's reprehensible to begin with. You know, prosecuting attorneys have a special duty outside of the scope of other attorneys in the sense that they represent the people. And, you know, they have this enormous power to bring charges and prosecute claims. And that's why we have rules that say that when you have information that is important to the defense, you have to produce it. So, you know, this case apparently is playing out. But, you know, if the representations are 50% true, you know, I think there needs to be some accountability on the part of these lawyers that perpetrated this, if in fact, you know, they're still practicing.
Absolutely, and we know that that's a very difficult thing. In order to sue a lawyer in this instance, you have to prove that they maliciously did these things purposefully to hurt you. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, and the reason why I brought this case up today, is because we were talking about Bahena Rivera. And I remember part of the evidence in Bahena Rivera was there was this odd DNA that matched no one found in the trunk of the car. This was a case where there was this sort of outlier DNA. We have another case, Roland, where there's some outlier DNA. You know, that outlier DNA, you know, we're seeing more and more in these cases that are overturned later, turns out to be the key. I wonder if it's important for jurors now to pay more attention to that DNA when it doesn't match anyone at the scene.
Well, sometimes. I know that's not a great answer, but, you know, sometimes. So part of the problem is not the jurors not paying attention to DNA, Michael. You know, it's, you know, practitioners have not caught up to the science yet, including members of the bench. You know, this has been an evolving science. Every single case I have with DNA, I learn something, you know, and the technology tends to change and adapt. You know, one thing about DNA, I think there's this presumption that everybody leaves it. And, you know, there's a terminology, they call it shedding in the DNA world. And some people shed DNA and some people don't. Some DNA will last a week, some will last a million years. You know, it's a science in the works. And I think sometimes the presumption is if someone's DNA isn't there, that they weren't there. And in all fairness to the state and prosecutors, that just isn't always the case. You know, it's a very nuanced science.
All right. Well, thankfully for Dennis Perry, it worked out for him. And I want to end this segment with his statement as he left